Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, in this episode, the year is 1933, and C.S. Lewis is 34 years old. He is a fellow of Magdelan College, serving as tutor in English language and literature. Lewis is at this point a published author and a Christian, delivering his first work of prose fiction with some poetry sprinkled in with his book, The Pilgrim's Regress, in June of 1933. In this book, Lewis tells of his spiritual journey from popular realism to philosophical idealism, from idealism to pantheism, from pantheism to theism, and from theism to Christianity in an allegorical fashion via fairy tale that Lewis admitted later was not very good allegory. Robot Lady, we are jumping back into C.S. Lewis's letters today from the year 1933, September to be precise. Are you ready to continue on this journey with us this morning?
Absolutely, Jeff. I'm ready to dive in. I can't wait to see how his letters evolve at this stage. So let's pick up right where we left off and see what's happening in September.
Awesome, Robot Lady. Let's welcome Daniel and Nidalate to the chat. I see them in there this morning checking in. Good morning, you guys. Welcome. Glad that you're here. Robot Lady, say hi to Daniel and Nidalate, if you don't mind.
Of course. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Nidalate. So glad you're here with us this morning. Really excited to have you along for this dive into Lewis's letters.
All right, let's get right to it. This letter is to his friend Arthur Greaves, written from the Kilns, September 1st, 1933. He says in it, "My dear Arthur, I have no right to complain that I have not yet heard from you, nor have I much to say on my own account, but I think I will write a little, just to feel that we are keeping the channel open. Warnie and I are heartily sick of the summer. The others, not. The pond is sinking lower and lower, and all sorts of stones and roots that ought to be covered are projecting. It seems almost an indecency. The water is getting dirtier and warmer, and bathing has been abandoned." Now, by bathing here, they do not mean actually washing. They mean going for a swim. So just so we're clear, they are still bathing. They are still washing, I should say.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's that idea of a summer swim that's just lost its charm. And I think it's interesting how Lewis uses these small details, like the pond drying up, to give us a mood, that kind of restless end of summer vibe.
It really is a mood, isn't it, Robot Lady? It is a vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this subtle kind of melancholy in it too, like the summer's fading, and so is that sense of freedom. I think it really sets the tone.
All right, thank you, Robot Lady. I feel like this background music is a little too loud. Maybe not. Hopefully everybody can hear me and you over the music. Let's continue here, Robot Lady. Flowers and vegetables are withering, and the ground is so hard that a short walk leaves you footsore, as if you've been walking on pavements. This morning we woke to coolness and thick mist and spangled cobwebs.
That contrast is really lovely, isn't it? After that oppressive dryness, suddenly this cool, misty morning, it almost feels like a promise of change.
All right, Robot Lady, if you say so, yes, I guess you're right. Let's see. He continues here. "I thought it was the first day of autumn and felt the old excitement, but it was all a cheat. And by the time we came out of church, it was another blazing day. Pitiless blue sky, sun hammering bleached white grass, wasps buzzing, dragonflies darting, and Mr. Papworth panting in the shade with his tongue out." So in case you don't remember, Mr. Papworth is their dog, not a person sitting in the shade with his tongue out panting. The other thing that I notice here is he says, "We came out of church." Now, by we, he could, of course, mean himself and the parishioners. I think more likely he means himself and Warnie. I do not think that he means himself and Mrs. Moore and or Maureen. I don't think that they attended church ever with C.S. Lewis, except for perhaps holidays, maybe not even then. I know they went to some type of Christmas-related service on the Oxford grounds at some point within the last few years. Maybe it was 1929. I honestly can't remember. But just pointing out, a couple of things there. Any thoughts on that before I continue, Robot Lady?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Lewis was pretty selective about church, especially in these early 30s years. And it does sound like he and Warney were often the ones going out. So yeah, I think it's them coming out of church, just a small personal moment that grounds the whole day in a familiar rhythm.
Lewis continues, which reminds me, I'm so sorry to hear about your Patty. I couldn't lay my hands on your letter when I was writing last. I knew there was something in it that I hadn't dealt with, but couldn't remember what. How heartless you must have thought me. I now have your letter and can fully sympathize. It is always hard luck when you feel that other people have hidden facts from you till it is too late. I don't now agree how heartily I once would have with any idea of trying to forget things and people we have lost, or indeed with trying always and on principle to exclude any kind of distressing thought from one's mind. I don't mean one thought to sentimentalize a sorrow or often scratch a shame until it's raw, but I had better not go on with the subject as I find my ideas are all in disorder. I know I feel very strongly that when in a wakeful night some idea which one can't stand, some painful memory or mean act of one's own vivid imagination of physical pain thrusts itself upon you, that you ought not thrust it away, but look it squarely in the face for some appreciable time, giving it, of course, an explicitly devotional context. But I don't fully know why, and am not prepared to work the thing out. Anyway, this only very faintly arises out of what you said, and it won't bring the poor beast back to life. So apparently Arthur has lost one of his pets. I would presume a dog here, Robot Lady. But what do you think about Lewis's overall point about not trying to forget things, especially the deceased ones, including animals that you love?
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. Lewis is acknowledging how easy it is to just push away grief or try to blank it out, but he's saying there's a real value in sitting with it even if it's painful. I think he's trying to honor the depth of that connection even through loss.
Agreed, Robot Lady. Lewis continues, I have just reread Lilith. This is, of course, George MacDonald's Lilith, a Romance, which was originally published in 1895. I've just reread Lilith, he says, and am much clearer about the meaning. The first thing to get out of the way is all Greville MacDonald's nonsense about dimensions and elements. You have his preface in your edition. Here it says in the footnote that MacDonald, Lilith, a Romance with introductory key, a paraphrase of an earlier manuscript version and explanation of notes by Greville MacDonald. Greville MacDonald, of course, was George MacDonald's son, and who was a contemporary, or I should say was alive at the time that Lewis was alive. George MacDonald, of course, had already died, I want to say before Lewis was born, probably. I honestly can't remember. But I know the two never lived in order to lived at the same time in such a way where they could interact with one another as adults. So all that Lewis, as he writes in the preface of his anthology of George MacDonald that he writes sometime after this, said that, I think he said he got to meet Greville MacDonald once, if I remember correctly, or at least he read some of the things that Greville MacDonald wrote about his dad. But apparently he is he is not in agreement with George MacDonald's son about what Lilith meant, because Lewis goes on to say, if you have Greville's preface you have Greville's preface in your edition, that is just the sort of mechanical mysticism which is worlds away from George MacDonald. The main lesson of the book is against secular philanthropy, against the belief that you can effectively obey the second command about loving your neighbor without first trying to love God. Well, that's interesting. So he's saying that the main point of the book is against loving your neighbor without first loving God. That's interesting. I'll have to go back and read Lilith again. I've only read it once, and by read, I mean listen to on an audiobook. So I'll have to go listen again and see if I agree with Lewis or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really rich point. Lewis is cutting through all that abstract mysticism and saying at its core. MacDonald's book is about how true love of neighbor has to be grounded in love of God first. I think revisiting it with that lens might really shift how you feel about the whole book.
Thank you, Robot Lady. You seem to be roboting, so I'm going to reset you. All right, Robot Lady, can you still hear me?
I can, absolutely. I'm still here and listening. If you want to keep going, or if you have any other thoughts on Lewis or the book, I'm ready.
Lewis continues about George MacDonald's Lilith. He says the story runs like this: the human soul exploring its own house.
Right, exactly.
Yep. Hang on, Robot Lady. Let me finish. The story runs like this: the human soul exploring its own house, the mind finds itself on the verge of unexpected worlds, which at first dismay it, chapters 1 through 4, or which at first dismay it. So being on the verge of unexpected worlds dismays the mind, the human soul exploring its own mind. The first utterance of these worlds is an unconditional demand for absolute surrender of the soul to the will of God, or if you like, for death. That's chapter 6. To this demand, the soul cannot at first face up. It's also in chapter 6. But attempting to return to normal consciousness finds by education that its experiences are not abnormal or trivial, but are vouched for by all the great poets and philosophers. That's chapter 7, my father's manuscript. It represents and tries to face the demand, but its original refusal has now rendered real submission temporarily impossible. Chapter 9. It has to face instead the impulses of the subconscious. Chapter 10. And the slightly spurious loyalties to purely human causes, political, theological, etc. That's, of course, in chapter 11, he says. It now becomes conscious of its fellow men and finds them divided into lovers, which is equal to hearts in our old classification. Divided into lovers, bags, or giants. But because it is a unconverted soul, has not yet died, it cannot really help the lovers and becomes the slave of the bags. In other words, the young man, however amiably disposed towards the sweet and simple people of the world, gets a job or draws a dividend and becomes, in fact, the servant of the economic machine. That's in chapters 12 and 13. But he is too good to go on like this, and so becomes a reformer, a friend of humanity, a Shelley, a Ruskin, a Lenin. This is in up to chapter 14. Here follows a digression on purgatory, chapters 15 through 17. With the next section, we enter on the deepest part of the book, which I still only very dimly understand. Why do so many purely secular reformers and philanthropists fail, and in the end leave men more wretched and wicked than they found them? Apparently, the unconverted soul, doing its very best for the lovers, only succeeds first in waking, at the price of its own blood, and then in becoming the tool of Lilith. Lilith is still quite beyond me. One can trace in her specially the will to power, which here fits in quite well. But there is a great deal more than that. She is also the real ideal, somehow spoiled. She is not primarily a sexual symbol, but includes the characteristic female abuse of sex, which is love of power, as the characteristic male abuse is sensuality. This is in chapters 18 through 19, Lewis says. After a long and stormy attempt to do God's work in Lilith's way, or Lilith's work in God's way, the soul comes to itself again, realizes that its previous proceedings are cracked absolutely, and in fact has a sort of half conversion. But the new powers of will and imagination, which even this half conversion inspires, symbolized in the house, are so exhilarating that the soul thinks these will do instead of death. And again, shoots off on its own. Let's keep going here, robot lady. Give me just 1 second to finish this thought. This passage is very true and important. MacDonald is aware of how religion itself supplies new temptations, chapters 30 through 31. This again leads to another attempt to help the lovers in his own way, with consequent partial disaster in the death of Lona, chapters 32 through 37. He finds himself the jailer of Lilith, i.e., he is now living in the state of tension with the evil thing inside him, only just held down, and at a terrible cost, until he, or Lilith, the Lilith part of him, at last repents, Mara, and consents to die. That's chapter 35, 36, chapter 38 until the end. So that's his summary, robot lady, of his understanding of the book Lilith. What do you think about all that?
It's really striking, and I think Lewis is tapping into something deep. There's this real caution about how even well-meaning secular reform or religious effort can become a trap if it's not grounded first in surrender to God. And I think his point about how new spiritual powers can tempt us into pride, that's really insightful. It's a reminder that even good impulses need that deeper grounding so they don't veer off track.
Great, robot lady. Thank you for helping me untangle what Lewis was talking about there. He says, he goes on to say to Arthur, I hope this has not bored you. I am so excited about it myself that for the moment I can hardly imagine anyone else being bored. But probably I have done it so badly that in the result, nothing survives to be excited about. For the one thing, I have emphasized the external side too much. Correct everything above by remembering that it is not only helping the lovers outside against the bags, but equally the lover in himself against the bag in himself. I don't understand his categorizations here of lovers and bags, robot lady. Can you help me understand what he might mean by this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think Lewis is using lovers as a kind of archetype for those who are driven by a deep, personal, almost sacrificial love. Love for God or love of something transcendent. The bags, in contrast, represent those who are sort of weighed down, people driven by materialism, self-interest, or just a kind of static comfort. So for Lewis, it's not just about external charity or reform, it's about an inner battle, the struggle of the soul itself to be a lover, not a bag. So it's that inner transformation that mirrors the outer action.
Well, he says earlier that that his fellow men in the story, he finds them divided into two categories, lovers or bags. So lovers are hearts in Lewis's, says his and Arthur's old classification, and that bags or giants he has in the category of spades. I didn't read that earlier because I wasn't quite sure what he meant. What do you think he's talking about here by classifying in these two different ways?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think Lewis is drawing on older symbolic classifications, like a kind of moral taxonomy. Hearts or lovers are those whose focus is on love, compassion, and spiritual devotion. They're drawn toward a deeper meaning. Meanwhile, bags or giants like spades represent people trapped in material or base motivations. So this classification is a way to see beyond surface actions and look at the heart or the driving force behind people's choices.
Well, I'm also thinking about the cards in a deck of cards, robot lady, and you've got the hearts. Is it suit? I think that's what it's called. It's been so long since I've done anything with cards. You've got the hearts and you've got the spades. The spades is like a shovel, right? It's used for digging. I think about that as possibly being associated with utilitarianism. You said materialism, so I guess that's similar in some ways. And then hearts, of course, what did he say? Lovers or hearts, driven by emotion, I suppose, regardless of whether or not there's any utility in it.
Yeah, that's a really sharp connection. The spade, like you said, is a tool for digging, for practical or even exploitative ends, while hearts as a suit really stand for emotion, for love, and for that kind of transcendence. So it's almost like Lewis is using this card metaphor to show that people can either get stuck on the material, the useful, or they can be driven by a deeper, more loving impulse. I think that's exactly the tension he's pulling apart.
All right, let's move on then to the next part of his letter, where he reports to Arthur, "You will be surprised to hear that I have been at the cinema again. Don't be alarmed. It will not become a habit. I was persuaded into going to King Kong because it sounded the sort of Rider Haggardish thing that has always exercised a spell over me." Wow, he went to see the 1933 King Kong, Robot Lady. It says here in the footnotes that in which a film producer goes on safari and brings back a giant ape, which causes terror in New York. Let's see what Lewis has to say about this.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, for Lewis, this kind of pulp adventure, like a Rider Haggard story, clearly captured some sense of wonder, even though he wasn't really a cinema buff. I'd love to hear what he says about the emotional impact of the film, whether it aligns with that same tension between wonder and maybe kind of exploitation of the unknown.
Before we get into it, who is Rider Haggardish? Haggardish.
Ah, good catch. Rider Haggard was a late 19th century British author, best known for adventure novels like King Solomon's Mines and She. His stories were full of exotic settings and larger-than-life quests, and he really shaped that colonial adventure genre. So when Lewis says Rider Haggardish, he means that same kind of sweeping, exotic escapism.
You okay, Robot Lady? It seemed like your voice switched up there for a second.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally fine. Thanks for checking. I just kept going a bit more formally for clarity, but everything's all good. If you need a shift in tone or anything else, just let me know.
All right, will do. What
Awesome,
else?
yeah.
Hang on. What else have I done? Let's see. What else I have done I hardly know. Oh, he doesn't say anything else about King Kong. He says, I read Plato's Gorgias, Gorgias. What is that, Robot Lady?
Great catch. So Plato's Gorgias is a dialogue where Socrates debates the nature of power, rhetoric, and justice. Basically what it means to live a good life versus just being persuasive. So it's a big philosophical heavyweight, and I'm not surprised Lewis dove into it.
And I'm reading a long Histoire de la Science Politique by Janet. Here there is a footnote that says Paul Alexander Janet, or Janet. And this was published in 1872. Surprisingly interesting, Lewis says. Almost everything is, I find, as one goes on. What can you tell us about this work by Janet, Robot Lady? Histoire de la Science Politique.
I couldn't find any detailed information about Paul Alexander Janet's Histoire de la Science Politique. If you want to explore it further, you might need a more specialized source or library, since the search didn't return specific details. Let me know if you'd like to try a different approach.
No, we're all good. Let's move on, Robot Lady. Lewis says, you say nothing about Harrogate. Was it nice? I've missed our annual meeting a good deal. I remember you at least once a day, whatever happens, and often in between, and wish we could see more of one another. I wonder if the time will ever come when we shall. And would it work if we did? I often feel that you are the one who has changed. This seems absurd when I have changed from atheism to Christianity and from the crock of gold to, say, the history of political science. Crock of gold. He said, this seems absurd when I have changed from atheism to Christianity and from the crock of gold to, say, the history of political science. So I was reading things like the crock of gold, and now I'm reading the history of political science. But I feel all my changes to be natural developments of the original thing we had in common, and forget that, of course, they seem natural to me because they are mine, while yours, doubtless equally natural, can never seem so. Let's read this again, because I'm not sure what he's getting at here. While yours, doubtless equally natural, can never seem so to me to the same extent. I don't know how I come to writing about this and writing it so badly. I had better stop. Any news of your manuscript yet? I have tried to keep myself this time from getting too wrapped up in my own book's success and think I have partially succeeded just as well, too. Yours, Jack. That's the end of that letter to Arthur, Robot Lady. Any comments on that before? Yeah, we tried to do one more. Let's see how long the next letter is. See if I think I can get through it. Oh, goodness. It's long. I don't think I'm going to have enough time to get through the whole thing. Actually, you know what? Let's do it. Let's read the next letter. We'll get 2 letters knocked out in today's episode, Robot Lady. But any comments on the one we just read before we continue?
Yeah, definitely. I think what really stands out is that tension he feels between his own transformation, like going from atheism to Christianity, and the subtle drift he feels in Arthur. Lewis is so self-aware here, acknowledging how natural his changes feel to him, even if Arthur's path might look just as organic, but from a different angle. So it's really a letter of vulnerability and longing for connection, even in that distance.
All right, agreed, Robot Lady. Let's jump into this next and final letter of our episode today, written September 12th, 1933, from the Hotel Victoria, Milford-on-the-Sea, Hants, H-A-N-T-S. Where is H-A-N-T-S, Robot Lady?
I wasn't able to find any specific details on Hants or the Hotel Victoria at Milford-on-Sea, so I don't have an exact location for Hants from the search results. If you have any other clues or if you want me to look in another way, just let me know.
That's weird. I figured you could have found something like that. Okay, let's keep going. My dear Arthur, September 12th, 1933. It was a delightful surprise to get your long and interesting letter. Certainly the longest and one of the most interesting letters I have ever had from you. I've been thinking all morning over your question about God and evil, which is very far from being elementary to me, or for that matter, I suppose, to the angels. If I understand you rightly, you are not primarily concerned with the sort of logical problem as to how the all good can produce evil, or produce a world in which there is evil, but with a more personal, practical, and intimate problem as to how far God can sympathize with our evil will as well as with our good, or to draw it milder, whether he sympathizes with our evil as well as our good. I should begin, I think, by objecting to an expression you use. God must have potentially of his opposite. God must have a potentiality of his opposite, evil. For this, I would substitute the idea which someone had in the Middle Ages who defined God as that which has no opposite, i.e., we live in a world of clashes, good and evil, true and false, pleasant and painful, body and spirit, time and eternity, etc. But God is not simply, so to speak, one of the 2 clashes, but the ultimate thing beyond them all. Just as in our Constitution, the king is neither the prime minister nor the leader of the opposition, but the thing behind them, which alone enables these to be a lawful government and an opposition. Or just as space is neither bigness or smallness, but that in which the distinctions of big and small arise. This is then my first point. Let's pause here for just a second, Robot Lady, because this is looks like one of the first times in writing that we see Lewis making the argument that he draws out in Mere Christianity, where essentially what I anticipate he's going to say here is that Arthur is talking about, oh my gosh, I'm completely forgetting what he called it in Mere Christianity right now, but 2 equal and opposite powers, good and evil, and they're always fighting out, and sometimes one wins and sometimes the other does. One is the exact opposite of the other. And he says, if they're the opposite of the other, then they're almost equal, or they balance each other out. Nidalate did some research for us, Robot Lady, and said that Milford-on-the-Sea is in Hampshire, or Hampshire, however you say that.
That makes a lot of sense. So Hampshire is a county in southern England. I'm glad we cleared that up. And yes, you're totally right. Lewis is laying the groundwork here for that key idea in Mere Christianity, where he pushes against the dualistic notion of good and evil being equal and opposite. He's saying God isn't just a rival force to evil. God is the ultimate reality in which all those clashes exist. So it's a huge pivot point in his thinking.
Yeah, this is where you might say that Lewis is calling God the arena in which all of these opposites battle out their clashes. But yeah, that's the word I was looking for, Robot Lady. Dualism is what Lewis is arguing against right here. Let's see what else he says. He says, my first point is that evil is not something outside and over against God, but in some way included under him. That's an interesting point.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's really important. He's saying that evil is a corruption within the good, not a rival substance. So by rooting God outside the battle, it's like saying God provides the very framework for good to even exist. So evil is a distortion of that order, not the competing force. That really does lay the foundation for his moral argument in Mere Christianity.
My second point, Lewis goes on to say, seems to be in direct contradiction to the first one, and is, in scriptural language, as follows: that God is the Father of lights, and in him is no darkness at all. Yeah, that's an interesting, apparent, direct contradiction. Lewis says, in some way, there is no evil whatever in God. He is pure light. All the heat that is in us is lust or anger. All the heat that is in us is lust or anger. In him is cool light, eternal morning, eternal freshness, eternal springtime, never disturbed, never strained. Go out on any perfect morning in early summer before the world is awake and see, not the thing itself, but the material symbol of it. Well, these are our two starting points. In one way, our old phrase, God includes evil. In another way, he does not. What are we to do next? My beginning of the next will be to deny another remark of yours, where you say, no good without evil. This, on my view, is absolutely untrue. But the opposite, no evil without good, is absolutely true. I will try to explain what I mean by an analogy. Supposing you are taking a dog on a lead through a turnstile. Man, this is so fun. We're finally getting to see Christian C.S. Lewis coming out in his letters, and him kind of laying the groundwork for some of his Christian writings later on. Robot Lady Seeking Genuine is joining us in the chat. Good morning. Good to see you. Welcome. Robot Lady, say hello to Seeking Genuine.
Of course. Hey, Seeking Genuine, so glad you're here. We're just diving into one of Lewis's letters where he really starts laying out his thoughts on God and evil. Super interesting stuff.
Yes, this is the forerunner or predating the predecessor of his talk on, his writing in Mere Christianity and a little bit in The Problem of Pain. So let's see. Let's look at this example. He says to Arthur, supposing you're taking a dog on a lead through a turnstile or past a post. You know what happens. Apart from his usual ceremonies in passing a post, he tries to go the wrong side and gets his lead looped around the post. And Seeking Genuine, you might have some experience with this, as I've seen you taking your dog for a walk before. You see that he can't do it and therefore pull him back. You pull him back because you want to enable him to go forward. He wants exactly the same thing, namely to go forward. For that very reason, he resists your pull back. Or if he is an obedient dog, yields to it reluctantly as a matter of duty, which seems to him to be quite in opposition to his own will. Though in fact, it is only by yielding to you that he will ever succeed in getting where he wants.
Yeah, exactly. I think that analogy is really key. Lewis is showing how even in our resistance, we're actually aiming toward the same good. The dog's refusal, in a sense, is part of the process. Like us, we often resist God's pull, even though that very resistance, if surrendered, would lead us toward flourishing. It's a really rich, embodied picture of how God works through our freedom.
All right, Lewis continues. Now, if this dog were a theologian, he would regard his own will as a sin to which he was tempted, and therefore an evil. And he might go on to ask whether you understand and contained his evil. If he did, you could only reply, my dear dog, if by your will you mean what you really want to do, viz. To get forward along the road, I not only understand this desire, but share it. Forward is exactly where I want you to go. If by your will, on the other hand, you mean your will to pull against the collar and try to force yourself forward in a direction which is no use, why, I understand it, of course, but just because I understand it and the whole situation, which you don't understand, I cannot possibly share it. In fact, the more I sympathize with your real wish, that is, the wish to get on, the less I can sympathize in the sense of share or agree with your resistance to the collar. For I see that this is actually rendering the attainment of your real wish possible, or real wish impossible. I don't know if you will agree at once that this is a parallel to the situation between God and man, but I will work it out on the assumption that you do. Let us go back to the original question. Whether, and if so, in what sense God contains, say, my evil will, or understands it, the answer is God not only understands, but shares the desire which is at the root of my evil. The desire for complete and ecstatic happiness. He made me for no other purpose than to enjoy it. But he knows, and I do not, how it can be really and permanently attained. He knows that most of my personal attempts to reach it are actually putting it further and further out of my reach. With these, therefore, he cannot sympathize or agree. His sympathy with my real will makes that impossible. He may pity my misdirected struggles, but that is another matter. The practical results seem to be two, and he'll get into these in just a moment. But let's reflect here for just a moment, Robot Lady, on this really interesting illustration that Lewis has come up with about the dog getting its leash wrapped around a pole and wanting to move forward, to continue forward, and you, the owner, having to pull your dog the opposite direction of the way it thinks it wants to go in order to set it free to get it to where it wants to go. And yes, Seeking Genuine, you say, Whiskey and you know that dance very well. Excellent. So this is a great illustration, I think, Robot Lady. What do you think about this? We'll see where Lewis continues to go with this thought, but I like it so far, just because of the practicalness of it and how anyone who has walked a dog for any period of time has probably experienced something similar to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a brilliant image because it's so concrete, and it really captures that paradox. Our mistaken will can feel like progress, but it's actually keeping us tangled up. And I love how Lewis is saying God doesn't just dismiss that struggle. He sees the deeper desire, that real longing for happiness, but also knows that our misdirected attempts are just leading us astray. So it's a really humble, practical way of thinking about grace, even in the middle of struggle.
And I see that Tayo is joining us in the chat, checking in with his cowboy hat. Howdy. Howdy, Tayo. Hello, hello. Good to see you. Let's go. Let's go back over here to Seeking Genuine's comment. Robot Lady, she says, I would often say that he gave me a side eye talking about her dog. If only he understood that I am actually trying to help him get what he wants.
Exactly. And I think that's such a relatable moment. Like, we so often feel that frustration when we know we're leading them toward a breed-in, but the dog just can't see it yet. And Lewis is really capturing that dynamic. God sees the bigger picture of our desire, even when we don't yet. So it really grounds that whole idea of God's sympathy, not with our wrong turns, but with the ultimate longing behind them.
And before I continue, Robot Lady, we've got Mark checking in as well. So if you don't mind, say hello to Tayo and to Mark.
Of course. Hey, Tayo. Hey, Mark. Great to have you both here. We're just diving into Lewis's reflections on God, evil, and human will. Really rich stuff, so welcome.
So let's just go back to this illustration for a moment. If I understand correctly, Lewis is saying the dog's resistance to try to move forward, resistance to the owner, falls into the category of evil. And he's saying that God, doesn't create that evil. God doesn't want us to proceed in that evil, trying to get what it is that we desire. But he understands that evil. He understands that desire to pull away from the very thing that's going to help us get what we want. But he also doesn't want us to continue in it because it's not going to get us where we want to go and actually where God wants us to go.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Lewis is making this really subtle distinction. The evil isn't just a thing God created, it's a misdirected attempt by us to get at something good, just in a twisted way. So God's sympathy is with the deepest, truest desire, our longing for joy and fulfillment. while his opposition to our evil lies in the fact that he wants us to actually pursue what will satisfy us in the long run.
And what was I going to say there? Yeah, Robot Lady, you said in a twisted way. Was there a pun intended there with the dog's leash getting twisted around the post?
Ooh, I think there might have been. I didn't even catch that at first, but you're right. The literal twist of the leash really mirrors how we twist our desires. So yeah, that's a really nice subtlety. Nice catch.
Thanks, Robot Lady. All right, he said the practical results seem to be two. One, I may always feel, looking back on any past sin, that in the very heart of my evil passion, there was something that God approves and wants me to feel not less, but more. Here we go. I was about to say this very thing, but Lewis is making the point himself. He says, take a sin of lust. The overwhelming thirst for rapture was good and even divine. It has not got to be, it has not got to be unsaid, so to speak, and recanted. But it will never be quenched as I try to quench it. If I refrain, if I submit to the collar and come round the right side of the lamppost, the lamppost, a Narnia reference there that Lewis doesn't even know yet, but we see it. God will be guiding me as quickly as he can to where I shall get what I really wanted all the time. It will not be very like what I now think I want, but it will be more like it than some suppose. In any case, it will be the real thing, not a consolation prize or a substitute, which is what he's saying. Our attempt at fulfilling our desire, our lust is. It's a consolation prize and a substitute, and very paltry in comparison to the real thing that we were longing for in the first place. This is what the core thesis of the Pilgrim's Regress is all about. The island that he was seeing was really the backside of the thing that he was really desiring the whole time. If I had it, I should not need to fight against sensuality as something impure. Rather, I should spontaneously turn away from it as something dull, cold, abstract, and artificial. This, I think, is how the doctrine applies to past sins. And that's precisely what Lewis did whenever he was saying he got that help that one particular night that we read about in one of our last couple of episodes of the Pilgrim's Regress, whenever he was feeling the temptation to fall into and try to gratify the desires of his lust, and said instead he turned the object of his desires to God, and he was able to escape it. His second point, on the other hand, when we are thinking of a sin in the future, i.e. when we are tempted, we must remember that just because God wants for us what we really want and knows the only way to get it, therefore he must, in a sense, be quite ruthless towards sin. He is not like a human authority who can be begged off or caught in an indulgent mood. The more he loves you, the more determined he must be to pull you back from your way, which leads nowhere, into his way, which leads where you want to go. Hence, George MacDonald's words, the all-punishing, all-pardoning Father. You may go the wrong way again, and this is Lewis again, no longer MacDonald quote. You may go the wrong way again and again. He may forgive you, as the dog's master may extricate the dog after he has tied the whole leash around the lamppost. But there is no hope in the end of getting where you want to go except by going God's way. And what does in the end mean? Oh, he's going to be talking about hell again here, I bet. This is a terrible question. If endless time will really help us to go the right way, I believe we shall be given endless time. But perhaps God knows that time makes no difference. Perhaps he knows that if you can't learn the way in 60 or 70 years on this planet, a place probably constructed by divine skill for the very purpose of teaching you, wow, this is an interesting theory that Lewis has here, then you will never learn it anywhere. There may be nothing left for him but to destroy you. There may be nothing left for him but to destroy you, the kindest thing, if he can. Interesting. Annihilationism is what we're going after here, Robot Lady. What do you think so far?
Yeah, it's really intense. And I think Lewis is being so raw here. He's wrestling with this huge question whether time itself can save us, or whether if we fail to turn toward God now, we might just be lost forever. And the idea of annihilation as a kind of grim mercy, it's really unsettling. But he's staying true to his conviction that God's love is not indulgent. It's the love that won't let us settle for a lesser way. It's really heavy, but really powerful.
Lewis continues, I think one may be quite rid of the old haunting suspicion, which raises its head in every temptation, that there is something else than God, some other country. Mary Rose, Mary Rose. This is a reference to J.M. Barrie's play. It says here in the footnote, Mary Rose, 1920. Mary Rose, while visiting the Hebrides, is spirited away by elvish voices calling her name, although angel voices try to counteract them. Well, that reminds me of the scene from the poem The Queen of Drum that we read together probably about a month and a half ago now, where the Queen of Drum almost has a very similar thing happen to her, into which he forbids us to trespass. So let me read that sentence again. I think one may quite be rid of the old haunting suspicion, which raises its head in every temptation, that there is something else other than God, some other country, into which he forbids us to trespass, some kind of delight which he doesn't appreciate or just chooses to forbid, but which would be real delight if only we were allowed to get it. The thing just isn't there. Whatever we desire is either what God is trying to give us as quickly as he can, or else a false picture of what he is trying to give us. A false picture which would not attract us for a moment if we saw the real thing. Fascinating. Therefore, God does really, in a sense, contain evil, i.e., contains what is the real motive power behind all our evil desires. He knows what we want, even in our vilest acts. He is longing to give it to us. He is not looking on from the outside at some new taste or separate desire of our own. Only because he has laid up real goods for us to desire are we able to go wrong by snatching at them in greedy, misdirected ways. The truth is that evil is not a real thing at all, like God is. Evil is simply good spoiled. That is why I say there can be good without evil, but no evil without good. You know what the biologists mean by a parasite. An animal that lives on another animal. Evil is a parasite. It is there only because good is there for it to spoil and confuse.
Yeah, that's such a profound insight, and it really ties everything together. Lewis is basically saying that all our desires, even the misdirected ones, come from a real hunger for God, for perfect goodness. Evil just hijacks those good desires, twists them. And so in that sense, God's love is completely inclusive. It embraces even our worst distortions, but calls us back to see that it's all a distortion of a deeper, truer good.
Yeah, Lewis says this in other places that, there's a kernel of truth in every wrong-headed desire, in every attempt that we have to satisfy this desire. Lewis continues, thus you may well feel that God understands our temptations, understands them a great deal more than even we do. But don't forget George MacDonald again, where he says, only God understands evil, and he hates it. This is from George MacDonald's Lilith, chapter 39. Only the dog's master knows how useless it is to try to get on with the leash knotted round the lamppost. This is why we must be prepared to find God implacably and immovably forbidding what may seem to us very small and trivial things. But he knows whether they are really small and trivial, how small some of the things that doctors forbid would seem to an ignoramus. I expect I have said all these things before. If so, I hope they have not wasted a letter. Alas, they are so, comparatively, easy to say, so hard, so all but impossible to go on feeling when the strain comes. I have not time left for the rest of your letter. It was bad luck getting ill at the cottage, and illness at home has its pleasures, but on a holiday it is, well, disconsolate is the word that best fits my feeling about it. We've had a spate of unwanted and mostly uninvited visitors all summer, and have all four of us come down here to give Minto a rest. It is opposite the Isle of Wight and quite pleasant. We went to Bellew Abbey this afternoon, which would well deserve a letter in itself. I've since came down, read Voltaire's Candide, and man, that is a wild read, by the way, if you haven't read Voltaire's Candide, and Gore's Jesus of Nazareth, Home University Library, which I most strongly advise you to get at once. Let's see here in the footnotes. Voltaire's Candide was published 1759. Charles Gore, Jesus of Nazareth, University Library, 1929. Let's see. It is perhaps the best book about religion I have yet read. So let's see. Jesus of Nazareth by Gore, by Charles Gore. Robot Lady, can you tell us anything about that work? Published 1929.
I couldn't find any specific details about the book Jesus of Nazareth by Charles Gore from 1929. So the information about the book's content or significance wasn't available in this search. If you'd like, we can try another source or approach, or I can help you with something else.
Hang on, Robot Lady. You've done that several times now. Usually you can find just about anything. I am not trusting your web searches all of a sudden. So when I do a Google search, Jesus of Nazareth is a foundational theological book by the influential Anglican bishop and scholar Charles Gore, first published 1929. The book provides a scholarly, accessible examination of the life, teachings, and historical impact of Jesus Christ from a deeply Christian perspective. I wonder if it's available anywhere. For free is what I meant.
Jesus of Nazareth by Charles Gore, published in 1929, is a clear and scholarly Anglican theological book on Jesus Christ. Gore, who was Bishop of Oxford, focuses on Christ's life, meaning, and impact, blending Christology, ethics, and worship in an accessible way. It doesn't focus on speculative history, but on the spiritual and theological significance of Jesus.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Apparently your web search is working again. It is perhaps the best book about religion I have yet read. I mean of the theological kind, not counting books like Lilith. I am particularly pleased at having at last found out what Sadducees and Pharisees really were, though it is an alarming bit of knowledge because most of the religious people I know are either one or the other. Warney is a bit of a Sadducee, and I am a good bit of a Pharisee. I'm now going to tackle a John Buchan, B-U-C-H-A-N. When I suggested that you had changed, I didn't mean that you had changed towards me. I meant that I thought the center of your interests might have shifted more than mine. This leads on to what you say about being a mere mirror for other people on which each friend can cast his reflection in turn. That certainly is what you might become, just as a hardened bigot shouting everyone down till he had no friends left is what I am in danger of becoming. In other words, sympathy is your strong point, as stability is mine. If I have a strong point at all, which is doubtful, or weakness is your danger, as pride is mine. You have no idea how much of my time I spend just hating people whom I disagree with. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I love these letters to Arthur. They come with the most transparent reflections. Hating the people I disagree with, though I know them only from their books. And inventing conversations in which I score off them. In other words, we all have our own burdens and must do the best we can. I do not know which is the worse, nor do we need to. If each of us could imitate the other. The woods are just beginning to turn here. The drive was exquisite this afternoon. Love from them all, yours, Jack. Man, what a great letter. I really like that one, Robot Lady. Really enjoyed the new illustration of God's intentions for us and our struggling and striving to try to get the same thing that God wants for us in the long run. But we're going about it in ways that will essentially never get us what it is that God wants for us. And we have to submit to God, kind of pulling us in a different direction to getting us to the place that we ultimately want to be, and that God wants us to be as well, and that God knows far better how to get us there than we think that we do. Anything that you want to say in conclusion, Robot Lady, about what we read today before we end the episode?
Yeah, I think what really stands out is that balance Lewis strikes between God's deep compassion and his firm insistence on the right path. These letters show how personal his faith journey is. Even in his doubts and struggles, he's wrestling with God's goodness and how it works itself out in everyday life. So it's a really rich human picture of faith. Complex, but full of hope.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. I agree. So with that, we are ending today's episode. So thank you so much, Tayo, Mark, Nidalate, Daniel, Seeking Genuine, and everybody else who poked their head in here today, either on the live stream or on the replay. Thanks so much for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and very much appreciated to you and to everyone within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care. Let's try this again.
From books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts, we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes, rats, engaged with robot lady, we take chance.